Good afternoon and welcome. This is the 1 o'clock hearing of the Committees on Housing and Committee on Water and Land. Just one note, the Committee on Housing also has a 1 p.m. deferred DM, and so we'll be doing that after the joint Housing and Water Land agenda. This meeting is being streamed live on YouTube. In the unlikely event that we have to abruptly end this hearing due to technical difficulties, the committee will reconvene to discuss any outstanding business on Tuesday, February 6th at 1 p.m. in room 225, and a public notice will be posted on the legislature's website. Our time limit per testifier will be 1 minute. Okay, at this time, I'd like to welcome our committee members, Vice Chair Hashimoto and Senator Awa, and also our the Chair of the Water and Land Committee, Senator Inouye. Our first measure today is Senate Bill 1587, relating to affordable housing. It establishes the Affordable Housing Land Inventory Task Force to update the maps, tier tables, and inventories of state lands suitable and available for affordable housing development in the Affordable Rental Housing Report and 10-year plan, and requires a report to the legislature. First testifier is HHFDC in support. Okay, they stand in support. Office of Planning and Sustainable Development with comments. Thank you. They support. Hawaii Leeward Planning Conference in support. Hawaii Island Economic Development Board in support. Hawaii Realtors in support. BIA Hawaii in support. And then Kariston Walker, Jacqueline Valoy, and Gail Brakey in support. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 1587? If not, members, do we have any questions? All right, the chair has a question for OPSD.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Harrison Rowe for OPSD.
Thank you. So what should the reporting and sunset dates be for this bill?
We point to the testimony from, I'm sorry, Bill. I'm not sure. We'll have to get back on that. Okay. If we have any comments on that yet.
Okay. And then the second question, how much money would you need to do this?
I want to thank you for staff sending us that question in advance. We conferred this morning, and we need a little more time to develop an estimate. It would really depend on to what degree, which is kind of not in the bill yet, to what degree you want to really look at the feasibility of any of those lands for development. You know, if it's not just a mapping of the lands exercise. And we wanted to get some clarity from you, which you can provide us offline about that. We'd be glad to get back to you with more accurate estimates or range of estimates depending on the degree of technical feasibility, infrastructure availability, leases, things like that.
Okay. Further questions, members? If not, thank you very much. We'll move forward to Senate Bill. Sorry, Chair.
Just a comment. I think OPSD, well, I think it's directed to my colleague here, the chair as well. Chair, I think they're also adding, they recommend that BLNR, Land Use Commission, in their recommendation, you have some amendments to be made, but also that they want to add BLNR as a member. Okay. And you're willing to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, if not, we'll go next to Senate Bill 2011 relating to housing. It allows the construction of multifamily dwelling units on any lot within certain designated county zoning districts subject to reasonable standards that each county may adopt. First testifier is HHFDC in support. Okay, they stand in support. BIA Hawaii in support. Grassroots Institute of Hawaii in support. Gail Brakey in support. Okay, I think that's it. Anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 2011?
Hawai'i Appleseed in support. It's good to increase density in urban core and across the state for our affordability and for more homes.
You want to stick?
Yeah, can you please state your name for the record?
Arjuna Han.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify? Okay.
No.
We'd like to welcome Senator McKelvey at this time. And do we have any questions or discussion, members? Okay. If not, we'll move next to our next bill, Senate Bill 2018, relating to housing, which prohibits a county from changing the land use designation or zoning of a parcel or parcels of property to a less intensive use or reducing the intensity of land use within an existing zoning district below what was allowed under the general plan or specific land use designation and zoning ordinances in effect on January 1, 2024. It allows a county to change a land use designation or zoning ordinance to a less intensive use if the county concurrently enacts measures to ensure that there is no net loss in residential capacity. Our first testifier for Senate Bill 2018 is County of Kauai Planning Department in opposition. Grassroots Institute of Hawaii in support. And Regina Gregory in opposition. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 2018? If not, members, do we have any questions? If not, our next bill.
Maybe, Chair, can you explain, Kauai is not here. I guess they're not on Zoom either, the opposition. Let's look at their testimony then. That's the only county though that's sending communication, yeah.
No, it's Maui County.
It
Yeah,
is.
about Maui County, they've been opposed in the past.
Not today though. Okay,
They
thank
might
you,
not
Chair.
be-
Thank you. Senator McKelvey, do you have?
Oh, no. I'm trying to, this is a bill from last year, right?
From this,
Yeah, but we did one last year. Similar.
you may, I don't remember. All right, well, we'll move forward then to our next bill, Senate Bill 2021, relating to important housing lands. Requires the Hawaii Public Housing Authority to conduct a study identifying certain state-owned lands located within a 1/2 mile radius of any rail mass transit station, including lands owned by OHA and excluding lands under the jurisdiction of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands that are most suitable for constructing at least 100,000 housing units. It appropriates funds to HPHA to conduct the study or contract services to conduct the study. And before I get into the testimony, it's the chair's intent that we move the first bill on this agenda, Senate Bill 1587, as the vehicle to do such a study instead of this one. So we're inclined to defer this measure. Our first testifier is HPHA in support. Stand in support. DHHL with comments. Disability and Communication Access Board with comments. Regina Gregory in opposition. Gail Brakey in support. Anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 2021? Okay. If not, we'll move forward next to, or is there anyone, any questions, members? Okay, if not, we'll move to Senate Bill 2064. Relating to HHFDC, which authorizes HHFDC the right of first refusal for the development of property for all development on state lands, excluding the Stadium Development District and lands under the Hawaii Public Housing Authority and Department of Hawaiian Homelands that are within county-designated transit-oriented development zones or within a 1/2 mile radius of a proposed or existing transit station if the county has not designated transit-oriented development zones, which shall be triggered by a proposed development or transfer of fee simple or leasehold property interest. Requires state departments and agencies to provide 180 days advance written notice of any approval of a proposed development or transfer of lands. Our first testifier is DLNR in opposition.
Ian Hirokawa with DLNR Land Division. Testimony in opposition is basically rooted in a focus on section C and D of the bill, which go beyond a right of first refusal. The way we read it basically gives HHFDC almost total discretion to take and develop state lands regardless of what other public purposes are there. So, for example, the way we read it, you could have land under DOE for use as a school, but if HHFDC wanted to develop it, they could simply come in and take the land. So, we think it goes beyond what the scope of the bill is as a right of first refusal. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next testifier.
Chair, Ian, can we ask, Ian, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here, Senator. Yeah.
Okay, your reference was on section C?
Section C and D, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, and I think because just to give you background, there was a similar bill last year with that right of first refusal, and we submitted comments with our concerns, but we didn't oppose it. When we looked at it, it seems like this bill is a little different, which raised us to go and oppose it on that basis.
Do you have recommended language or wording that you might add for the committee to consider?
I would say this. I mean, if it can go back to, I think the difference between the bill this year and last year was it didn't have C and D, and I think the window for HHFDC was to act on the right of first refusal was, I think it was 60 days last year instead of 180. But like I said, last year's bill, we had our concerns, but we're also willing to work with HHFDC as well. So, I think something like that would be more palatable than essentially an outright ability to take the lands.
Maybe you might consider some language, if you don't mind.
Okay. Another question for DLNR. So could you specify what in paragraph D you object to?
Basically, one, it has the subsection 1 where it says has the right to acquire title without, it seems like they have the unilateral right to do it if they want to, and that would definitely go before the land board. In any normal situation, if the agency had lands set aside to them, and they wanted to either relinquish the set aside or transfer title, it would have to go before the land board. So this case, it kind of sidesteps the land board, goes HHFDC. It appears that they can just unilaterally exercise it. And also in part 3, it puts the onus on the State Department that's losing the land to ensure that there's title. So we think that, okay, well, it's not really fair, because if HHFDC wants the land, I mean, they should do due diligence and for themselves. So it's, like I said, 1 and 3 under D.
Doesn't paragraph D only apply to subsection A? It wouldn't apply to the so-called unilateral transfers that you're talking about?
So if there's a lease, I mean, so what you're saying is that if I understand correctly, it means that if you're proposing a development or another lease or other transfer, then D applies. But that may be true, but in the end of the day, if you're talking about a transfer fee title, let's say, for example, if you have land set aside to another agency, the title still vests under the Board of Land and Natural Resources. So in theory, if you wanted to transfer the land away, the agency that holds the land would have to come back to the board and seek approval to do so. And in this case, it seems like HHFDC can just come in and say, no, I want to acquire the title in this land. That's how I read D, even if it's triggered by subsection A.
Yeah, I understand the concern. I think we've had other issues as well when we dealt with transfer of lands to DOE as well. HHFDC, anyone here? Yes, can you come up? And maybe can clarify, or this is not your bill though, right?
No, this is not our bill.
Yeah, okay. Would you have some language with regards to what Ian is saying?
Yeah, we certainly understand
Yeah.
and respect the department's position,
Right.
because we wouldn't want to interfere with their planning for other state functions. We did support testimony in support of this measure, what we had in mind are projects like the Hale project, which was completed about a year ago, in which case we took the judiciary's parcel in Pava'a, and the ground floor or bottom floors provide space for the judiciary, and about 20 floors of housing is on top of that. So it's a mixed-use development with government functions and affordable housing. So we will be looking at those kinds of opportunities where an underutilized site can be used more efficiently for both housing and the government function use.
Yeah, we have no problem, using state lands. I think when we discussed housing in general, we're looking at this point in time where we are today and the needs, that certainly there are lots of state lands, but all of the lands transactions, including leasehold lands too, all must be approved and go before the BLNR. And that's what is being raised here, right, Ian? So anything to do with
Correct.
using state lands. So there must be some language here to touch that area here.
If I can just follow up then, again, just to reiterate for DLNR, the deletion of paragraphs C and D would address your concerns and you would no longer have any issues with the bill if paragraphs C and D were deleted?
Well, I think we may have concerns, but not, I think what raised it to the level of opposing it was the C and D language. Yeah, that was the more, what I would maybe characterize as more onerous provisions in the bill. I think, like I said, may have concern about a right of first refusal, but we've worked with HHFDC in the past on, conveying lands to them for housing projects, and, we look to continue working with them. So that's not necessarily as large of an issue, but it's definitely the C and the D subsections.
I have no problem with the language, but we need to stipulate that somehow we have to have language to identify that any state lands are used, that upon approval of the BLNR, maybe that section, if we can add, the language to that effect, then it won't upset you guys, right, Ian?
Oh, it definitely would improve it, yeah,
Yeah.
if the
Right.
BLNR had,
Yeah,
like, we have to
instead
come
of-
back and, yeah.
Instead of
Mhm.
you taking it out. So,
They're okay.
oh, okay, up to you then. Okay, if you take it out, then
Then you're okay, right?
Not 100%.
not 100%, he said.
What,
But that would still be required.
Jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Ian, what if C and D were taken out and you still needed residual board approval to catch any, would that like satisfy the concerns across the board?
If you need, even for the right of first refusal, you'd need board approval?
Yeah. 'Cause you were saying that C and D would remove the most onerous provisions of the bill, but you still had concerns with it, so.
Oh, yeah, I think generally like a right of first refusal, but yeah, if it went before the board and, the board makes any decision ultimately, then I think that, yeah, that goes a long way to resolving.
Okay, thanks.
Leave it to your recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I think we're on,
2064. It was
yeah.
the first
Are we on?
testimony.
That was
Yeah.
the first one.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll next move to DHHL with comments, followed by HHFDC in support. Stand in support. DCAB with comments. Church of the Crossroads in support. John Kawamoto in support, and Gail Breakey in support. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 2064? Okay, any further questions or discussion, members? If not, we'll hand it to the Water and Land Committee next.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to SB 3053, and this is relating to the conveyance tax, this increases the conveyance tax rate for certain properties. It exempts conveyances of certain real property from the conveyance tax. It eliminates the cap on the amount of conveyance tax collections allocated to the Land Conservation Fund and Rental Housing Revolving Fund, allocates 10% of the conveyance tax collections to the dwelling unit revolving fund for the purpose of funding infrastructure programs in the TOD areas as well. Testifiers list, which I did have it. Lots of discussions on this hot topic, conveyance taxes, members. DLNR, okay, Van Matsushita. Yes. Okay, thank you. DBED, any representative? Director Tokioka, in support. HHFTC?
Support.
Okay, mahalo. Office OPSD?
Hello,
Okay.
Taxpayer Policy Center with OPSD and stand on our testimony and support.
Mahalo. Okay. DOTAX.
Still tax sounds on our comments.
And members, any of these who are standing up to testify in support of their measure, if you have any questions of them, please let us know as well. Feel
Yep.
free to ask. DHHL. Okay.
At the appropriate time.
Anyone that we called? It's fine with
Yes.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for Mr. Minakami.
HHFDC?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you, Director Minakami. Currently now, how much is in the DERF fund?
Right now, it has an available balance of, I believe, roughly $40 million.
$40 million. And is there a lot of that carries over, or is there a,
That is the uncommitted balance. There is a balance of committed, which I don't know offhand.
okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll continue on to testifiers and DHHL. Sends communication support, Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation in support, testifying for the Disability and Communication Access Board, sends in comments by Kirby Shaw. Okay, NIOP in opposition and was going to be present. Hawai'i Appleseed. Okay. Aloha. And introduce yourself as well.
Thank you,
Mahalo.
Chair. Arjuna Haim with Hawai'i Appleseed. In support, as well as some recommended amendments. Currently, as written in the disposition of taxes, it doesn't remove the caps on the Rental Housing Revolving Fund or the Land Conservation Fund. We would request that the committee remove those funding caps and just do the flat 50% and 10% rates for both Rental Housing Revolving Fund and Land Conservation Fund. Additionally, we recommend raising all rates at the $4 million and above sales point. Thank you.
Oh, 1 second. I'm going to ask you, can you go back to your first comment on the amendments?
Currently, as it's written in the bill,
Okay, 1 second. I'm trying to find you on my testifying list. Okay, go ahead.
So in the section 24-7 disposition of taxes, the Rental Housing Revolving Fund and Land Conservation Fund still retain the caps on both funds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the recommendations to be
Yes.
changed.
Thank
Okay,
you.
all right. Thank you. Okay, Hawaii Realtors?
Thank you, Chair. This is Garcia from Michael and our testimony.
Okay, can you come on up, please? Thank you. Any sections on the opposition or the entire measure?
It's kind
I'm
of a
sorry,
general.
can
No,
you-
thank you so
Because you're
much.
on the microphone. Can you
Oh,
state your
yes.
name again, please?
Thank you. Lindsay Garcia from Hawaii Realtors. Good afternoon, chairs. So in general, we do support the need for infrastructure. We understand the intent of the bill and are supportive of the intent. However, just in general, we do not support taxing housing for and increasing the cost of housing, just in general. And so in
Okay.
general, we tend to be opposed to any attempts to increase the conveyance tax. And so while we do support the intent of the measure, we would humbly request that another source of funding be identified.
And not through the conveyance tax.
Ideally, yes, thank you.
Anyone wants to, yes, Senator Cheng,
Thank you.
Chair Cheng.
Thank you. So I think there's this belief that this bill is increasing conveyance tax on luxury homes primarily, but you stated in your testimony that, for example, an apartment building that's being rented out to low-income individuals would also be taxed at this much higher rate. That's also true for farms and commercial, industrial, and other non-residential property.
Correct, correct.
Would you feel more comfortable with the bill if it were confined to just single-family homes and condos?
Well, in general, we disagree with the premise of trying to increase the cost of housing in general. And so that's just our general position, Senator. We understand, however, the need to find funding for infrastructure, and we do believe that is very important. So we understand it's a very important issue and be happy to be part of the conversation to try to figure this out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
As a follow-up to that, to Miss.
Senator Elefante.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. As a follow-up to those two questions from our previous chairs, Ms. Garcia. So from how I understand it correctly, the realtors wouldn't want any increase, even if it was 1 cent for properties 6 million and above. Did I hear that correctly?
Just in general, yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for the realtors? Thank you, Lindsay. Hawaii Housing Affordability Coalition. Susan Lee. Aloha, welcome.
Hi, Susan Lee, representing the Hawaii Housing Affordability Coalition. Just want to say we really commend this bill. Updates to the conveyance tax hasn't been done for 14 years, so it's been much needed. As well, we really appreciate the allocation to dwelling unit revolving fund for infrastructure costs. I wanted to clarify a little bit in my testimony that we're asking for tax rate increase above the 4 million mark. I know the bill also starts at non-owner occupied units tax increase at the $2 million mark, and we also appreciate that. But after the $4 million mark is when a majority of the homes are non-owner occupied. So we are asking for a more or a higher tax increase after that sale point. Oh, as well to remove the language of, or include the language of removing caps to the rental housing revolving fund and land conservation fund. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for them as well? Hearing none. Let's see. Catholic Charities Hawaii.
Chairman Betty Larson with Catholic Charities Hawaii, and we support this bill. We have the same amendments to take the caps off the rental housing revolving fund and the land conservation, especially focused on the rental housing trust fund or rental housing revolving fund, the new name. This is so critical because not only does it now focus on the funding for people who are at 60% AMI below, that's traditionally what it focused. The legislature said we really want to look at tier 2, which is housing for people at 80 to 100% AMI. So there's an added big group and added money that's needed. So where do we find that money? So we can meet both of those critical needs, our workforce and our low-income population that faces homelessness and is struggling so hard. So we feel this is one way to create that monies. We also think that, of course, the DERF and with climate change, we really support that there is a need to look at what is our land conservation and how can we improve that. So the cap on that we feel should also be removed. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Any questions on them? Thank you. Partners in Care, Laura Thielen, or the other Laura Thielen. Yes. Tax Foundation of Hawaii on Zoom. Tom Yamachika, IT.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. This is Jade McMillan on behalf of Tom Yamachika for the Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We've submitted some comments on the measure and we will stand on our written comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Waianae Community Redevelopment Co-op or Ma'u Organic Farms. Sense Communication comments. David Arakawa with LERF, Land Use Research Foundation of Hawaii, in opposition. Democratic Party of Hawaii, the Education Caucus, in support. Hawaii Children's Action Network, in support. Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, in opposition. HCDA, thank you. Stanford Car Development, Sense Communication in support as well. Hawaii Habitat for Humanity Association, in support. Nature Conservancy, comments. Hawaii Life, in support. And Liahong, in support. And let me say that these are all in support. And let me know if you're here and if you want to speak. In support. Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, IMU Alliance, Democratic Party of Hawaii, Hope Services Hawaii, and there's several, there's about 10 in support. This is an administration bill. Anyone from the administration that we'd like to ask questions of? Okay, please come forward. And your name, please.
Katia Balaciano, Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Okay, so did this measure come from you as well, your office?
Yes, that's correct. We had completed an infrastructure financing study this past December, and one of the recommendations to help finance infrastructure that would unlock housing and respond to the housing crisis was changes to the conveyance tax, as you see before you.
Okay. In most cases, many have not changed and just changing the language, but there's quite a few that is new. As an example, for the properties with the value at least 10 million and less than 14 million, and we're looking at page 2, members of your of the bill itself, and that was at least a $1 per $100, but there's an increase of 40 cents. So that's one of them. There's another on age, the value at 14 mil, less than 18, you're going from, actually that's a new, to $2 per 100. That's a new ad, okay? And the properties at least 18 million to 22 million at $3. And that's addition. Including on page 3, you're looking at properties with a value at least 2 million from 60 cents and increasing to $1. And all of page 4 are all new ads. So apparently, I think the increase of the valuation goes from $4 million to $26 million. So just to clarify that those are new added into the statute. Question on page 10. I have a question on number 3. And this is the 10% shall be paid into the dwelling unit revolving fund. And that's for identifying in 201 and 191 for the purposes of funding infrastructure programs in TOD or transit-oriented development areas that we know of. My question is, can you explain what infrastructure is it to be applied to, and what areas? And why I raise that is we want to make sure, or this body would probably question if part of the real would be included, and that's the question I've had from others out there. So can you explain where those funds will be distributed to for the TOD areas and the infrastructure?
Yes.
Because you're talking about 10%, yeah.
Yes, that's correct. The OPSD is implementing a TOD strategic plan that had originally been funded by the legislature, and with the TOD Council, the state TOD Council has been implementing since 2016, 2017.
Oh, okay. So that's the committee that I belong to as well.
That's
so
correct.
Those TOD infrastructure areas also include the neighbor islands that we also included in the working group of the TOD that when we added the counties.
Yes, that is correct. So this is a statewide program. And for people who are listening, transit-oriented development is that development that is taking place around both rail stations and bus stations, bus mobility hubs, areas where people end up congregating and using public mass transit to get to work and to get around. So those areas have been identified in that strategic plan, and those are the areas that we're talking about on Oahu and on the neighbor islands.
Okay. Part of the TOD also was including the rail areas.
That's
Is
correct.
that going to be applied as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can, just for discussional purposes, just to ensure that we know the rail system is going to be a big infrastructure needs. But we just want to share with you that because we've added the neighbor islands to address their transportation needs as well, that perhaps ensure that monies are not only distributed for Oahu.
Yes, certainly. And also this is not intended to build the rail. This is primarily the infrastructure that is underground, sewer, water, electrical, that ultimately goes to support housing and redevelopment in areas that are around the bus stations, bus mobility hubs, rail stations.
Okay, I just wanted to share that with you because I think my colleagues would want to know as well. And some are in their districts, but understanding that part of the TOD for Oahu and the rail stations includes the participation on the city and county lands as well. And they're part of the TOD, I guess, when we included the counties in this program. But I just want to make sure that we all understand where the monies are going to as well. Any questions? Senator McCarthy.
Well, a couple is, first of all is, you know, what is the county's going to be doing to contribute, or what is their part, I guess, input on this infrastructure fund that the state's conveying? Because a lot of what you just described usually falls under the county funding.
And it will still fall under the county. The counties, through their capital improvement programs, are contributing regularly on a regular annual basis towards improvements to infrastructure. However, as we have learned and heard from the legislature in the past few years, we are recognizing that the state is also a developer. The state is building significant amounts of housing or plans to develop housing on its properties. And therefore, to expedite the construction of this housing on state property, some state contribution is necessary.
Well, then, I mean, there's a disconnect for us on Maui because the TOD areas, especially in South and West Maui, are limited. In fact, the one in West Maui is a quarter of an existing highway, right? And so where the housing is being developed, where the infrastructure needed isn't along these TOD. So I guess what concerns me is by limiting it only to TOD, you take away the flexibility to go ahead and invest in infrastructure where the housing is actually going, which is not necessarily in the TOD area. See what I'm saying?
Yes, I do understand. And I do understand that housing is needed all over the place in the right location in order to provide what's necessary to a wide variety of folks. coming from the TOD, the State TOD Council, we have learned that the most efficient way to use infrastructure is around the transit stations, around the bus stations, so that people don't necessarily need a car to, go to work and therefore can use mass transit. So, our focus has been around those transit-oriented areas where people can reduce the cost of living through the use of mass transit. In certain areas, it's more robust than others.
But the needs are different in those other areas. And like for Central Maui, where my friend is from, yeah, the TOD corridor is well defined. You have mass transit well defined, but in these other areas, it's very fuzzy nexus, and what's really needed is infrastructure outside of them for the affordable housing, is what I'm saying. So limiting it kind of blunts its value in the area where it's most needed. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Do you remember the areas that Maui had included in their TOD? There's more transportation, yeah?
Yes, it's the Kahului area. It used to be the Lahaina area. In Kihei, there's a section. Wailuku.
The Kihei West Maui sections were not, one of the issues was even though they were quote TOD, that wasn't where the affordable housing development was going. In fact, it was spotted as a very problematic place to continue to build out that kind of housing because of that corridor is an existing highway corridor. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, but again, in Central Maui, it makes total sense because of the way their corridor is and how well it's used and everything else, and how TOD really plays out more along the lines of TOD there.
We can work with our partners in Maui on the TOD Council to better delineate those areas.
Okay, thanks.
Because a lot of the input came from the county, in the discussions that they.
That's within the TOD.
Yeah, outside of it. Okay, Senator Elefanti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Palaciano, you mentioned in your testimony that this is part of the governor's package and that your agency was your agency the lead for coming up with the recommended proposed changes?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and I know you referenced the TOD infrastructure report as a highlight from the recommendations on where to expand the need for TOD, building more housing in TODs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, in follow-up to those two questions, I'm just curious on how the proposal came about for starting up at, the different tiers of properties. Like, how did OP decide we're going to charge this rate and then this rate for homes valued at this tier, et cetera, and et cetera?
We certainly did not want to increase the cost of conveyance tax for those lower priced homes and for the bulk of the average priced homes here in Hawaii. So that was one consideration. The other consideration is that we looked at bills that had been introduced in previous years, and we also looked at the comments that had been provided, the testimony that had been provided in previous years, and tried to lower the increases to better reflect the concerns that were identified.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Chang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Why was it important to include multifamily housing, to include, farms and other properties that might be valued over $6 million as part of this tax increase?
Well, some of those, the multifamily homes, more folks are living in high rises and expensive high rises. And so the sales of those units is something that could, contribute towards improvements in TOD areas. And in terms of farms, I don't believe the intention is to tax the farms themselves, but rather there are certainly expensive homes on some farmlands that have, that may not always be involved in farming. We've been calling them gentlemen farms.
But what about a multifamily building that is being rented out to low-income individuals? Wouldn't that be taxed at the new higher rate too if it were over 6 million?
If
Or
it
over 2
were,
million?
if it were not CPR'd,
Right.
that is correct. If you had wanted to remove that, I don't think we would be adverse to changing the measure to reflect that.
Well, according to this, we raised it from 90 cents to $1.10 per hundred, and that was for up to $6 million. So, yeah, if that's a concern, then we can change that. We keep it the same. But you're not sure though how many of those properties or apartment units that are being leased out or rented to nonprofits. It's hard to tell by the value. So unless we add, I don't know, because these are new increases, and I'm not sure how many of those would be sold and valued at the time of sale. How can we do this? Because can we do a section with regards to quantifying and qualifying the purpose at sale on the use in this measure? You know, if it affects, as Chair Chang mentioned, those that are selling the units, but because of the tenants as well, and address on the agriculture side. I mean, when you look at the big sale on Maui as an example, I would think that they went way over the 6 mil. I don't know what the purchase from the Pineapple, what was that, to the new entity that's doing ag now, and that's agriculture, right? So just to address, and I understand the chair's, you know, concern.
I think I understand as well. I mean, certainly this was written primarily for the single family home in mind.
Oh, okay.
You know, so so when I heard the testimony earlier, I also kind of started thinking about, you know, farmlands that didn't have a house on it, for example.
So this measure would not affect them?
It may, the way it's currently written.
That's why I'm
So-
asking,
Right, so
that's why I'm saying that perhaps,
I mean, if there was an exemption that you wanted to contemplate.
I'm willing to, knowing and understanding on your part that there's the concerns raised by the committee, that we can, I can give you some time and defer the decision-making on this measure only with the approval of it's a joint, and then come back for a decision-making next week sometime, if you can add some language.
Yes, we'd be happy to add
Is
some
that
language.
okay?
Yeah, and
Sure.
I think, I mean, as you just said, if the intent is to confine it to single family homes and I guess condominiums, then maybe that, do we need to even get into the industrial, agricultural, all this other non, you know, all this other property that doesn't fit into that category? Maybe this tax should only apply to single family homes and condominiums?
That is one solution.
Okay, yeah, all right. Any more questions from, okay, yes, Senator
Just to
McCallum.
clarify that even though the description says the caps are removed, they're not removed.
That appears to be an error in the bill. The description says that the tax, that the caps are removed, but in fact, they are not removed.
It's not, so we're working, staff is working now on the recommendations.
And I do understand from the testimony that was submitted that some people believe that the caps would be removed and have testified that they should be removed. However, our approach was intended to be more narrow and just did not touch those
Well,
caps.
the
Yeah,
description
right,
of your bill says it.
Yes, I
You guys wrote
understand
it.
that.
Yeah, and the recommendation that came from DLNR is to remove the cap, my understanding, on the on page 10 on the 10%, or for them, it's the 5 million, 5.1 with regards to the land conservation fund. So yeah, we're working on recommendations right now to do that. Okay. And if we miss something, well, we'll go over. Let's see what we have with the amendments, but so are we saying that, are you okay? Or do you still want her to work on some language? I would prefer maybe deferring this decision-making until we receive, your input.
We're happy to do that.
Okay,
Sure.
all right. And then, yes, Senator Elefante.
Just a quick follow-up. I know in my line of questioning, Ms. Palaciano, does OP have projections as to how much we would get in revenues for your proposed increases?
Yes, we did check with Department of Taxation for some rough estimates.
Could you provide that to the committees?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and we can circulate that at the same time when we get together on a date that we work on and
Yes.
making announcement. Okay, that was all we had for those testifying. Is there anyone else here wishes to speak to SB 3053? Okay, hearing none, Chair, I think that's it for now with our joints.
Okay, should we go into recess and then come back?
Sure. Okay.
All right, we're in recess. All right, welcome back to the Housing and Water Land hearing. Chairs having conferred, we're ready for decision making. We're starting with Senate Bill 1587 relating to affordable housing. For the Committee on Housing, the chair's recommendation will be to pass this bill with amendments. The amendments will be to first to move the reporting and sunset dates back 1 year from what they're currently in the bill. We'll also take OPSD's amendments to delete the word chair on page 2, line 5, and replace with executive director of the Land Use Commission. We'll add the chair of the board of the Land and Natural Resources as a member, and we'll add funding for the staff position and contractual services of $1 million. We'll also take the BIA Hawaii recommendations to replace the executive director of the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority, the deputy director of the Highways Division of the Department of Transportation, the chair of the Land Use Commission, and the chair of the Public Utilities Commission. Representatives will also include a representative from organizations with development experience. And the task force will be focusing on existing urban lands to minimize the need for major regional infrastructure improvements. And it'll also look at mixed-use development opportunities to redevelop underutilized existing state-owned lands with one government tenant or use. Further, we'll identify lands to accommodate a total of 100,000 new housing units and designate these as the important housing lands. And finally, we'll move this study from OPSD to HCDA. Members, any discussion or questions? Okay, if not, for Senate Bill 1587, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Chair votes aye. Vice Chair votes aye. Senator Aquino is excused. Senator Kanuha.
Aye.
Senator Owa.
Aye.
Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the Committee on Water and Land, same recommendation on SB 1587 with amendments. Any discussions, members of Waterland? Hearing none, Vice Chair Elefante for the vote. Chair goes aye.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 1587 with amendments. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair votes aye. Senator Chang.
Aye.
Senator McKelvey.
Yes.
Senator Favela is excused. Madam Chair, recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next bill is Senate Bill 2011 relating to housing. The chair's recommendation for this bill will be to pass this measure with amendments. We have technical and non-substantive amendments from SMA. Also in the committee report, we want to note the Grassroots Institute's testimony about covering newly created zoning districts. But I also wanted to note that changing the land use ordinance in each county to create these new zoning classifications is difficult and unlikely. Any questions or discussion on this? If not, so for the Committee on Housing, SB 2011, Chair's recommendation passed with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 2011, recommendation shares passed with amendments. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, recommendations adopted.
Okay, for the Committee on Water and Land, same recommendation to pass with amendments on SB 2011. Okay, members, any questions? Waterland Committee. Hearing none, Vice Chair for the vote, Senator Elefante, Chair votes aye.
Okay, Chair's recommendations to pass SB 2011 with amendments of the 4 members present. Any no votes or votes with reservations? Hearing none, Madam Chair, recommendations adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next bill is SB 2018 relating to housing. The Chair's recommendation for this bill would be to pass it unamended. In the committee report, we do want to note that this bill does not conflict with any of the Kauai County General Plan policies as raised in testimony. Downzoning can still occur as long as new residential capacity is provided elsewhere in the county. So again, for SB 2018, recommendation pass unamended for the Committee on Housing. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 2018 unamended. Chair votes aye. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With Senator Aquino excused, measures adopted.
Okay, the Committee on Water and Land, same recommendation to pass SB 2018 as is. Any discussions,
Chair?
member? Senator McKelvey?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the comments. I mean, I think that this goes way beyond the state's power with the counties. I think that was the thrust of it. I can't support the measure at this time because it's just too much over the top. And plus, I don't think I've had a chance to weigh in on it either from the county side. So,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you. Then Waterland, ready for the vote. Any further discussions? Hearing none, Chair's recommendation is to pass unamended. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2018 as is of the 4 members present, noting the objections from Senator McKelvey. Your Vice Chair will vote with reservations. Any other no votes or votes with reservations? Okay, hearing none, Madam Chair, recommendations adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next bill is Senate Bill 2021 report relating to important housing lands. As we just already passed a vehicle, Senate Bill 1587 for the identification of these lands. The chair will be deferring this measure.
It's agreeable.
You have to defer it.
No. Oh, yeah, we're in agreement.
Okay.
Yep.
So the Committee on Water and Land first also.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Senate Bill 2064 relating to HHFDC. The chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure with amendments. We have amendments from SMA to amend the bill description to 60 days instead of 180 days. Also technical and non-substantive amendments. We'll also take DLNR's recommendation to delete subsections C and D. And in the committee report, we also want to note the testimony from DCAB, and we'll also note DLNR's proposal to squander scarce TOD lands on warehouses, and also HHFDC's example of Kinau Hale as 2 examples of why this bill is needed. Members, do we have any questions or discussion? If not, for Committee on Housing, SB 2064, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 2064, Chair's recommendations passed with amendments. Chair votes aye. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With Senator Aquino excused, your measure is adopted.
Okay, thank you. For the Committee on Water and Land, Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2064 with amendments. Any discussions, members? Hearing none, Vice Chair for the vote. Chair votes aye.
Okay, Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 2064 with amendments of the 4 members present. Any no votes or votes with reservations? Hearing none, Madam Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. On to SB 3053 relating to the conveyance tax. Chair's recommendation is to adopt, first off on this measure, adopt the LNR's recommended amendments to strengthen the buying power of the Legacy Land Conservation Program, eliminating the cap on the amount of conveyance tax collections allocated to the Land Conservation Fund Secondly, we'll adopt Hawai'i Appleseed's recommended amendment to eliminate the cap on the amount of the conveyance tax allocated to the rental housing revolving fund. Third, we'll ensure that the blank portion of the monies from the dwelling unit revolving fund for the purposes of funding infrastructure programs in TOD areas must be spent for counties. I don't see. Sorry, I think I'm not in agreement with that question. Yes. We'll just delete that part. Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Okay. Okay, no monies will go to only one county, sorry. Okay, continuing on then, the conveyance tax increases in this measure shall not apply to property sales on rural or agriculture lands. And we'd like to also defect the date to July 2050 as well. But members, because of their very, I would say, extensive discussions with OPSD and them working on some language, as we discussed, I'd like to, and if it's agreeable to housing, Chair Chang to the committee as well, defer the decision-making to Thursday, February 8th at 1 p.m. in room 225. That would be the recommendation for Waterland and Housing.
That's right. So for the Committee on Housing, we'll also be deferring decision-making to Thursday, February 8th, 1 p.m. in this room 225. And so that brings this agenda to a close. We're adjourned.
Yes, thank you, everybody, for attending.
Good afternoon. It's 2:07 p.m. and the Committee on Housing is convening to DM on one bill, Senate Bill 2337, relating to housing, which expands the county's authorization to exercise the same powers as HHFDC for the purposes of developing, constructing, financing, refinancing, or providing mixed income projects and mixed use developments. It authorizes units in low and moderate income housing projects to be made available to households with higher incomes if there's an insufficient number of persons or families who meet income qualifying requirements, and it applies to bond proceeds expended by a county after 12/31/23. So the chair's recommendation will be to pass this measure with amendments. We'll be deleting reference to mixed income project throughout the bill and the definition of mixed income project on page 5, lines 18 to 21. And we'll also delete the power to sell restricted units to higher income buyers on page 4, line 18 to page 5, line 2. Members, do we have any questions or discussion? Okay, if not, so Senate Bill 2337, the recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye.
Members, SB 2337, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair votes aye. Vice Chair votes aye. Senator Aquino is excused. Senator Kanuha is excused. Senator Wah.
Aye.
Chair, your measure is adopted.
Thank you very much. There being no further business, this hearing is adjourned.